Welcome to Soul Stories, a talk show where we talk to leaders from across the globe, across multiple functions, verticals, and domains, and understand what it takes to be a leader and build deep expertise in whatever they're doing. Today, let's listen to Abhishek's soul story. Abhishek is one of the very few leaders in the country who's built and scaled multiple GCCs. What is a GCC? So, GCC stands for Global Competency Center. These are organizations that some of these and many of these multinational organizations come to geographies like India and build uh, to basically leverage the talent pool, time zones, and of course, the cost arbitrage. Come on over. Let's listen to Abhishek's soul story. Welcome, Abhishek. Thanks a lot for taking the time. Um, quickly, folks. So, Abhishek is probably one of the few leaders in the country who's, I think, set up GCCs from ground up and scaled them, right? And many times now. And he's been doing this for the last couple of years. Thanks, Abhishek, for taking your time. Would love to, if you could introduce yourself, and most importantly, how did you get into GCCs? And even more important, what is a GCC? Right, a lot of audience would probably know, and I'm taking time, but a lot of audience, I mean Indian, especially in India, would know offshore centers, right? That's how India story started. Right, a lot of the Infosys, Wipro, TCSs of the world kind of sold brand India and started off with offshore businesses. And then large organizations kind of caught on that wave and said, why don't we come in? Right. That's how I guess it all started. But would love to know, what is a GCC and then your story and your journey.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Vivek, for having me. Well, as the name suggests, GCCs are the global captive centers of their parent organizations, and they are based in, if I talk about India, say in Pune or in Bangalore, and they provide multi-function offerings to their global sites, not just IT, but say operations, finance, marketing, global HR, and even communications for that matter. And India is really booming in terms of the GCC story. We already have 1,500 of them in India.
Mm.
And it is estimated that in the next 2 years, 500 more will be added. So I keep on hearing that every other month, these many global organizations have set up their GCCs in India. There are two reasons why they're flourishing, and this GCC story is going to stay. Number one, the GCCs are moving up the value chain continuously, from transactional, say in finance, to value add, say data science, analytics, AI, ML, to finally to the strategic roles like defining the data governance or the corporate governance for their parent organizations. So that's the reason number one, moving up the value chain. Secondly, they have multiple functions housed within the same roof. So they draw synergies from one another to create a much bigger impact for their parent companies. For example, IT can help finance automate their processes or drive insights using the finance data. Finance is helping the SAP IT teams to develop that finance acumen. So collectively, they are delivering much bigger value to their parent organizations. In fact, I came to know recently that the GCCs are going to hire more staff in India than the Indian IT organizations. So I think
Wow.
this story is going to flourish even further. And with regards to me, I've been fortunate enough to ride high on this kind of a success story of GCCs in India. I started my career with as an individual contributor to one of the functions within a multifunction GCC. Then I scaled up leading that function, and then finally scaling up further, leading the multifunction GCCs right from ground zero, setting up, managing, and maturing them. right from the stage of writing the business case, formulating the strategy, the roadmap, making them operational, and finally making them the partners of choice for the global sites of the companies. So this is what my story is, and I'm very much confident about the GCC story. The future looks really bright.
Right. No, that's awesome, and especially that tidbit that you just gave, that GCCs will be recruiting more than the IT firms. That's a huge testimony to this model itself, right? That the competencies can be built outside of the organization's headquarters, and be able to scale and leverage both time zones, and as well as the arbitrage and cost as well.
Yeah.
That's a great thing. Given now that you've done, I think, couple of them, including, I think, you were also involved with an M&A deal, and that's how, right. And all that, you've seen the entire story unfold, and right from setting up to scaling, right? So two questions, right? One, challenges in setting up GCCs, right? When some organization outside hears the India story, they want to get in, right, and they want to get started. So the challenges that typically somebody setting up GCCs ground up, right? That's one. And second, even more important, as GCCs evolve, right, with their competencies, and offer some of the cutting edge, bleeding edge, like offerings, right, from like you said, data science to Web3, right? And so, what are the challenges there, right? So one is setting up, and second is in some of the advanced offerings, niche offerings, if I may.
Sure. So what I have learned over the last 5-7 years while setting up these GCCs is that if company X want to set up a GCC, say AI and ML are the most talked terms, nowadays. So the biggest challenge is how do you attract talent to these GCCs? Because AI, ML, or say GPT talent wants to work for large technology companies like Google or Amazon. But these
Right.
GCCs are seen as the sister concerns or the arms of manufacturing companies, which are their parent organizations, or say logistics companies outside India. So they don't have the technology brand to attract the technology talent. Yeah.
Correct.
So that's the biggest challenge I experienced while setting up a GCC, because talent is really the backbone of these organizations. So some of the steps that need to be taken are, for example, promoting what technology use cases you are doing within the GCCs so that they are visible to the technology talent in India. Going to various conferences, talk about your technology use cases, your vision related to technology, and how you are living up with the technology focus day in and day out. Collaborating with different universities, sponsor some technology hackathons, and finally also partnering with some specialized agencies which are like startups in AI ML space to build those capabilities, promote them to the talent on the social media or in other forums, so that it's actually visible to the technology talent. You are able to attract them. So that's from setting up a GCC. Secondly, from AI ML space or the cutting edge technologies, it's very important to have the use cases connected with the business value creation. So most of the companies, what they're doing in their GCCs in India, they're experimenting with a lot of use cases related to AI, ML, or all the new technologies, but they're not able to translate that into a business value, show the value to their stakeholders. So whenever we do investments in these cutting edge technologies, it's imperative that we connect these use cases or experiments with the business value. So that's the challenge I have seen as well.
Very interesting. Yeah, especially I think when this classic story started, right, which is offshoring, probably not so value added, probably in that pyramid. Probably the first ones to get offshored were those run of the mill jobs, right? Be it entry
Yeah.
level programming, or on the services side, the business process outsourcing to some of the other functions. now, and there it was very, very straightforward, where you could kind of almost build a
Mm,
factory model,
yeah.
right? And then, kind of it was all about training, give time, get a lot of entry level folks, and then run the show. But I think you rightly said, now India is kind of focusing, at least the GCCs globally, not just India, right? Now they are focusing on some of these leading cutting edge technologies. So yeah, extremely important to have this employer branding
Yeah.
to be able to. I guess that is a top of the agenda for every leader,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? That leads the GCC. Sure. So moving on, another interesting question. I think you touched upon this slightly in one of your earlier conversations. What are the new age technologies shifts that you're seeing in GCC? Like one you said AI, right? If you could expand on what you've been seeing, talking to your peers, noticing around.
Mm. Well, I've seen couple of shifts in the last 2 years. Yes, AI, ML, or data science are the most important enablers in these GCCs, but these are the capabilities, and they're cutting across all the functions. If you have, say, engineering as a function in your GCC, you will be again using the engineering data to draw insights out of it using IoT and whatnot. Similarly, the finance function will also have these capabilities to move up the value chain. But what I have seen in last 2 years is, and I've written a couple of articles in LinkedIn as well on these topics. I am seeing the two new functions to be added within the GCCs. It's all about ESG and sustainability. So
Mm,
environmental, social, and governance. So you see, most of the companies have set their net zero goals for 2030.
right. Correct.
So they have written the strategy how they're going to achieve those goals, but they are leveraging now the GCCs to accomplish those ESG goals. First of all, GCCs have strong capability in data and analytics. So GCCs are leveraging the ESG data, the production data, to let these organizations know where the opportunities lie to meet their ESG goals, in which factories they need to reduce their carbon footprint, which locations, and which part of their supply chain. So, secondly, GCCs have a very strong focus on KPIs and KPI driven operations.
Mm,
So, they're relying on GCCs to execute their ESG roadmap in a KPI driven method so that their ESG goals are tracked, delivered on time with the right quality and turnaround time levels. So this is what I have seen, and AI ML are adding more value to these new functions which are
mm,
being added. And India has been a strong proponent of meeting the sustainability goals in the last 2 3 years. So somehow a talent pool of sustainability managers and sustainability analysts have developed in Pune, which GCCs are leveraging to build on and execute the sustainability and ESG roadmaps of their parent organizations from India. So I think in the future, you will see sustainability or ESG centers of excellence being housed within the GCCs in India. And AI
very,
ML is going to add sufficient value to it.
mm, very, very, very interesting. So coming to, especially, like I said, when I started off, I think very few leaders in India, especially, who's seen both, starting from scratch to scaling this. What have been your top learnings, right? In the last, I think it's almost a decade now that you've been, like interacting with GCCs directly, indirectly, and now you head, of course.
Sure.
So some of the learnings that you've had,
Yeah.
would love to know.
So my top learning has been there should be a purpose behind the GCC, and
Mm, very
to
interesting.
really accelerate it, to really grow it, you need to make your GCC part of your company's or your group strategy. So it's
Mm,
important to have your own strategy pyramid defined. What is your mission, vision? What are your strategic areas, focus areas, and what is the roadmap? And then you take that strategy pyramid and align with your global stakeholders and get their buy-in. So you will feel, number one, part of a bigger purpose, that you are doing something which is aligned to the global strategy or global goals. Secondly, you will get more buy-in, more support from your stakeholders. When you see that you are aligning with them, your strategy is aligned to their goals, and you can help them accomplish their annual goals. So I think that's my most important learning, so that the GCC doesn't operate, doesn't work in silos. It should be very well connected with the purpose of your company. So that's what I learned. Secondly, you need to inculcate the same culture within the GCC as that of your parent organization,
Right.
so that the culture remains uniform. The core values are practiced daily in the GCC as it is happening in other sites. Because whatever strategy you may have,
Correct.
as it is rightly said, culture eats strategy for the breakfast. So you need to really have the same culture within the GCC.
Right. No, absolutely. I think can't stress enough on
Yeah,
culture, especially now that there are almost two teams, right? One, the HQ, and then there is this offshore center. So
yeah,
I think more than anything, having that culture and that confidence building, right? That
yeah,
these guys, we're one team rather than seeing those as
yeah,
like two teams, will deliver a lot of value.
yeah.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah,
No,
and when
great.
you have these two focus areas, aligning your strategic pyramid globally, and secondly having the same culture, then you will develop a partnership mindset with your global stakeholders. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. No, that's great. Now moving on to right, like you having seen this, you have this ringside view almost of what's happening with the GCC and how global organizations are looking at leveraging these. What kind of shifts have you seen in the last 2 3 years, and where do you see this going? Right, like let's say next 5 years. What do you see happening? Right, both in terms of the kind of offering or deliverables that these GCCs will offer and deliver, and as well as some of the other technology shifts, value additions, etc. Any thoughts on where do you see this going?
Sure. Well, I would call that GCC will eventually evolve as GIC, Global Innovation Centers, for the parent
Hmm.
organizations in the next 5 years. So they will play a very strong role in the innovation roadmap. They will own that roadmap. Some of the GCC leaders will have that seat on the table, wherein
Hmm.
the corporate strategy will be laid out. The GCCs will be consulted. Hey, this is what we are thinking to take the company in the next 5 years. How do you
Hmm.
think you can help us out?
Right.
So I think the GCC leaders will have that seat on the table uh,
Very
by building
nice.
the confidence what they're doing right now. So that's what I see. Secondly, what I believe is gone are the days when the GCC leader or the second line in command will do all the talking or the FaceTime with the stakeholders. Now, everyone, no matter at what level he or she is in the GCC,
Hmm.
spends a lot of time with the stakeholders, having those conversations on the daily basis. So I think that is the greatest value to be added by the GCC. If we onboard talent that can demonstrate a consultative mindset, that can challenge the status quo, and let the stakeholders know that, hey, here is the issue in your process, this is how you can improve it, and this is what the solution is. So I think GCCs will evolve as the global innovation centers, as a group of thought leaders or consultants, wherein every individual will be consultant and will demonstrate that mindset, and they will
Hmm.
offer end-to-end solutions. So I foresee that the stakeholders will come with one line problem statement. Hey, I want to grow the market share in, say, XYZ country. Just one line problem statement will come to the GCC. And GCCs will involved in defining the strategy, in doing the market research, identifying the customer segments, what products to offer, at what price points, using what IT platforms, and how
Right.
to measure the impact of it. So they will do end-to-end solutioning in the near future. That's what I see. And
Wow.
yes,
That.
technology is going to play the key enabler. The AI, ML, or whatever we talk about right now, will act as an accelerator to this kind of future growth.
Wow, that's very powerful, right? And even in terms of on the other side, it's almost a flywheel, right? So which means, like if I'm doing, if I'm being looked at as a huge value addition, like almost a R&D center, right?
Yeah,
And almost like you said, seat on the table, which means a lot of talent can be kind of, like attracted, right? It's almost like you could even get some of the top folks in some of these niche areas to come and participate and work here, because now you're in the domain, almost in this thing of you're innovating versus taking orders and executing. So
yeah,
it's a great flywheel that will get created in the next couple of years. That's a very interesting times.
yeah.
Awesome. So I mean, no, this is great. As we come towards the end of these questions, right? Two questions again, last two. Um, so for corporates across the globe that are looking at India or any other geographies, right? Given your experience of having set up, having gone through this drill, uh, any suggestions, any recommendations? What would you say? How if somebody wants to look at specifically, let's say India, right? And like across multiple offerings or niche areas, what would your recommendation suggestion be for those folks?
Sure. So my suggestion will be start with one or two functions as a starting point. Say the low hanging fruits are normally the finance, wherein you start with transactional finance and then you do RPA or finance reporting, you move up the value chain. So finance is the low hanging fruit. Then go with like other functions like IT or global HR for that matter. But it's important to have those first have those functions in place so that lets
Mm,
people
correct.
understand the processes or
Right.
get the business acumen. Unless they know the finance processes, if you ask them to automate them or do AI ML in them, they will falter. They will not have that business knowledge or the process knowledge to do it. So it should be incremental. You start with two functions, have one function, say finance, start with some transactional work, let people know the process of the business, and then ask them to move up the value chain and transform that. So start with transition, then transformation, and that too with couple of functions, then keep on adding it once you show the credibility to other and add other functions. So that will be my recommendation to the corporates who are planning to add new GCCs afresh in India. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. No, absolutely. Very practical. Another last question, right? Now that GCCs are becoming the in thing, like startups, right? So there'll be, I'm sure, a lot of leaders getting attracted to coming into GCCs and setting them up, leading functions, right? What would your you know again recommendation be for leaders? How should they start? Anything that they should look out for? uh, Learnings basically that you've had in your own career.
Yep. So they should start with a mindset that they're running startups within large multinational Fortune 500 organizations. So they need
Right.
to have both the words. Be very agile as a startup works, and secondly, they will get all the support from their large multinational setup. So they need to just keep themselves aligned with their global organizations, but they will have a good deal of independence to experiment locally because they are working in a startup. But again, I would like to
Right.
stress the same thing. In their GCC, they need to define the strategy, the goals, the mission, vision, and align it globally. Otherwise, it will become just a pull model wherein they will be spending a lot of their time convincing the global stakeholders to invest in the GCC. But if they do this first step right, uh, define the strategy pyramid, align it globally, then it will become a push plus pull kind of a model. They will get the right emphasis and the right support from their global sponsors and stakeholders so that everyone leverages the GCC.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the good part is, especially now that we are relating GCCs to startups, it's almost if you kind of think of it, it's almost like a funded startup, right? Like there's
Yeah.
a VC who's funded it. You have all the like you have the money, you have time, right, and you just have to kind of execute it right. Right, and align it with the larger goals, and have this culture mix, and make this successful. So it's an amazing, like an amazing opportunity for leaders, especially who want to kind of look at GCC. And like you said, for organizations, it makes a lot of sense now that India especially is mature as a market, to kind of come in and look at
Mhm.
establishing themselves, and not just for some of these run of the mill functions, but even like you said, can decisions be made out of these GCCs
Yeah.
that are based here.
Yeah. One thing I further recommend to the leaders is benchmarking is very important. So
Mm,
invest in spending time with your peer GCC leaders, learn from their journeys, and learn best practices, share knowledge. And now the good thing is there are various platforms available. So various
mm,
think tanks are available wherein different GCC leaders come together over coffee, they discuss, they benchmark. So I think those are really good practices wherein you can accelerate, you can minimize your failures because you are learning from the success and failures of others. So I think
mm.
benchmarking is really important.
Very cool. Very cool. I think this was great, Abhishek's a lot of insights, and thanks a lot for taking your time. And I'm sure people watching this, there'll be a lot of insights, and especially, I like this fact of, comparing a GCC to a startup. So it's even more exciting to a lot of folks. And for, leaders that are looking to enter India specifically, or setting up GCCs, I think that the time couldn't have been better. Uh, so absolutely, it was a pleasure. Thanks so much again, Abhishek.
Thank you, Vivek. It was fantastic interacting with you. I hope it turns out to be useful for the audience.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.